and welcome to this edition of EMS Now Up Close. I am Eric Miskell with EMS Now, and today I have the opportunity to speak with some representatives of Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories, SEL. SEL was introduced to me through a colleague at the Printed Circuit Board of America, Association of America, because it's an example, as you're going to find out here, of a domestic OEM here in the United States who made the decision to invest and build their own printed circuit board fabrication facility here in the United States. I think this is a great story, and we are glad to have two representatives here with us today. We have Jessi Hall, who is the Senior Director of Vertical Integration, and John Hendrickson, who is an Engineering Director, both with Schweitzer Engineering Laboratories. So both of you, thank you for taking the time to come and join me and tell this story. Jessi, I'm going to start with you. If you can begin by giving us more of an overview of Schweitzer to begin with, kind of the company, the business, and the type of products you're making.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for this opportunity, Eric. It's a delight to get to be here with you and to talk to everybody. So SEL, we are headquartered in Pullman, Washington, which is a fairly small college town in eastern Washington state. And what we make are we invent, design, and manufacture the products that protect and control our electrical power grids. They prevent blackouts. It started out with a protective relay that protects anything from generation to distribution. And now we make a wide variety of products, including rugged computers and clocks and everything else that might be needed to protect our electrical power system.
Okay. And you do this all through manufacturing in the United States. Is it all internal manufacturing? You're in charge of vertical integration, or do you outsource any of those processes?
So we the devices that we build, we manufacture all of those in the United States. So we have a manufacturing facility here in Pullman, Washington. That's actually where I'm located today. And then we also have one in Lewiston, Idaho, Lake Zurich, Illinois, West Lafayette, Indiana, and then now in Moscow, Idaho is where we're talking about today. Mm-hmm. So for that, we are assembling a lot of our products. So we do our board assembly, we build the products themselves, put all the relays together. We also do some vertical integration of the components that are used in our devices. So things like injection molding, we make the molds for our injection molding. We build some of our own sheet metal, machined parts, transformers, and then our newest venture is the printed circuit board manufacturing.
Yeah, thank you. So let's talk about that, because that's kind of the news here of late. If you can maybe explain, what is the scope of that PCB facility that you just finished building? I believe it's now open and operational.
It is. So we started production in March, and I'm not 100% sure by what you mean by scope. So if I don't quite answer the question, please clarify. So it's 100,000 square feet of manufacturing space, and the purpose of this is for us to be able to build our own printed circuit boards for SEL's use over the course of the next 10 years. So all of our volume.
Okay. And it's, as I understand, as the headline said, you've invested $100 million in this particular facility.
Yes, we have.
Okay. And that's, I think you broke ground in 21. I was talking to John before. It was conceived of kind of a few years before is when the commitment was made to kind of move in this direction.
So I think we really started in just in 2020, spring of 2020. So it's been a pretty fast project. It's been really exciting to get to be a part of that. I think it's really one of the fun things or important things to note is that SEL has, we've always been committed to having our printed circuit board manufacturing in the United States. So we have never offshored our manufacturing. We do all of our own printed circuit board design. And in fact, that is what John spent the first 20 years of his career at SEL doing, is printed circuit board design. Yeah. And then, as I mentioned earlier, right, we do our own assembly. So it's really filling in that missing gap in the middle. And it's really exciting to get to do that.
Yeah. And that was going to be my question is, so previous to this, you were outsourcing it all domestically. Did you ever, but this will be the first time, or this is the first time that you're actually manufacturing your own boards?
That is correct.
Oh, wow. So that's a learning curve, I'm sure.
Yes, it has been. It's been a really fun-filled, fast-paced 3 years.
Mhm. So what was behind the decision to make this investment? You're an employee-owned company, so it was an employee privately held, kind of employee-owned. $100 million is a lot. It's a big investment. What was the rationale for that?
So I think one of the things that we always consider when we're talking about vertical integration is how critical is the component. So at SEL, we have never considered printed circuit boards as commodities. We've always considered them to be critical components in our devices. So because it is such a critical component in how our devices operate, having a really robust supply chain strategy is very important. As everybody who's probably watching this knows, right, over the last 20, 25 years, the printed circuit board industry in the United States has changed quite a bit. So we're a fairly high volume, lower complexity consumer of printed circuit boards. So we've seen our business needs diverging a bit from what the market in the US is able to support. So that helped encourage our decision to go ahead and invest in this for ourselves.
Hey, how complex are those boards, John? I know that's was where you started with the design of these. Speak to that. How many layers, how complex, how many different varieties are there that you produce?
Yeah, so we have almost a little over 600 different boards today. And so they range from 2 layers to 12 layers. Technology wise, some of those designs go down to about 2,500 trace with a 3 space. And we have aspect ratios for the plated holes of 11:1 with our smallest drill today about 8 thousandths. Overall, lower technology with what you see domestically. But we definitely see that complexity growing over time. So for instance, when I started here 23 years ago, most of our boards were 2 and 4 layer. And right today, newer designs they're more of that 8 to 12. And we see a lot of that movement primarily because of the component availability we see in the market, and that component selection and what those suppliers are providing are driving some of that complexity in IO count that then grows our layer counts. And eventually, we might be looking at other micro via technologies and sequential lamination depending on the devices we choose in our future products.
Yeah. Did you have to do a lot of redesign during you mentioned the component, did you suffer shortages that required redesign?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Yeah. No, I think many people did. And people say that, we'll just redesign it like it's a simple thing, right? It's kind of the magic that goes on behind the curtain sometimes, I think. So,
right.
Yeah. Hey, Jessi, I did want to ask you before I get into a few more things with John, to be clear, though, the facility in Moscow is for internal manufacturing only. I know I'm going to have EMS companies watching this. We got another source, right? But that's not the case.
Correct. This is a captive shop. It's for SEL. It's for to meet our demand.
Okay. That's what I thought, but I wanted to be clear before your phone start ringing afterwards, right?
I appreciate that.
Yeah, we don't need that. Listen, one of the things that really impressed me when I read the press release and spent some time on your website looking at what's going on was really the consideration giving for the environmental impact, right? And that is part of it. And I saw that, and I'm going to quote your president here, that he called it the most modern, environmentally friendly and safe printed circuit board manufacturing facility in the United States and maybe the world. So tell me about that. You get to brag a little bit here, I think, but tell me about that facility and kind of the operations you have put in place.
Yeah, so definitely, right. We've talked about internally, we got the opportunity to build a green factory on a green field, right? Making green circuit boards. It's kind of the 3 greens for us. And I think that's one of the advantages we had we're starting from scratch, right? We didn't have pre-existing equipment or processes that potentially maybe would have drove our decisions a little bit differently. So one of the first ones that we really focused on is water consumption. And so we designed our chemical processes to use a lot less water than what you typically see in the industry today. That then allowed us to start looking at different water recycling systems. And ultimately we put in a zero discharge water system into our factory. So there's no drains on our factory floor. There's no drains in our water recycling room. The only drains we have in this factory for the sinks and the restrooms. And so that's where we're totally reusing everything and even breaking down the chemistry, evaporating off the water from that and reusing that into our processes. That also ties in, when we're talking about the environment in the factory itself, and the conditions for our employees is we brought in an air treatment system to manage all the chemicals that are evaporating off of our lines. And most of our lines are horizontal lines, but we do have one vertical line, and just managing that air, treating that air. And then that also helped us manage the emissions going out of the factory. And we're doing all that with a fume scrubber system. And after all of that, our total water consumption right now is around 500 or 600 gallons a day. And when you take a typical PCB shop, our size, they're typically running maybe upwards of 90,000 gallons of water into the plant a day, right? Using it, treating it, putting it back down the drain, where we're only bringing that 500, 600 gallons a day. And that uses, we're just losing that through evaporation.
Yeah. That's a great story, because I think you touched it perfectly. A lot of people think of this process historically as being a very dirty, environmentally unfriendly process, but technology is certainly, I remember going in my first one probably 25 years ago thinking, oh my God, right? I bet you if I walked in there today, it's probably eat off the floor, as they say. But I mean, these have become very clean, very environmentally safe, and I like that was a big consideration for SEL as you went into this. And I think Jessi, I saw a quote from you that you went into it not just as a manufacturer, but also as a community member, right? That you have a stake in this. You're putting this in the community where you all live. So I think that's a great testament here. Tell me too, I think that the approach that you took too, as I saw it, was also very team oriented. This wasn't, let's do this, let's outsource this and have somebody do this all for us. Y'all and the employees were very, very involved throughout this. And I think you even served as the general contractor, not you particularly, but SEL did, for the overall process. Tell me about that and the decision the way you approach this.
Yeah, as you mentioned, our property team does all of our construction management. And so from the beginning, right, when I joined the team, there was only a couple of us. And so obviously we focused on first hiring. And so, when I look at our partners internally, we had our HR folks, and then purchasing started to get really involved with helping us select our external partners. As we started to look at equipment and consumables that we would use. And then, we brought in our IS team, our environmental health and safety team, our finance team. And then we also work closely with our customers. So for us, our customers are going to be our research and development, where I came from, and then our assembly folks, to make sure that some of the processes we're selecting we're going to work for them and meet their needs. So for instance, one of the newer technologies we brought in on the factory was additive solder mask, right? We're using inkjet solder mask printers for all of our solder mask application. And we really looked at that heavily up front. We did a lot of evaluation and sampling and worked with both of those customers to ensure that it would meet the needs going forward. But yeah, we brought all those folks together at various times through the project and made sure they were heavily involved, especially even as we were selecting, say, equipment. We'd bring the majority of those folks in and review the equipment, right, to look at it from many, many different aspects, right, from a safety aspect, how we're going to integrate it into the factory, and then, what are the other interfaces that equipment might need. So for instance, like our IS team was heavily involved to make sure that we have the right communication to the equipment and that we can get information off of it, and to help automate our processes overall.
Yeah. So I must ask though, having spent 23 years, or starting as a board designer and then how cool was this for you to all of a sudden have kind of it all right there, right? Is that you could see your baby kind of come to life, so to speak.
Oh, it was very cool. And I think some of the efforts that our teams have done over the last 20 years is really work closely with our suppliers and understand the process. Over the years, we've taken most, if not all of our designers to board fabricators to help teach them the process. So we're understanding that process and how our design choices impact that process. And so it actually allowed us to simplify what we implemented, which is great. Like for today, we have one, resin system for FR4 we use because we've been able to consolidate that down. And a lot of other, I'll say, design rules that we've implemented over the years, it just helps keep products consistent and manufacturable as they go through the process. So Jessi and I joke a lot. It's like it might be a blessing and a curse because now I'm going to find out maybe some of those other things we didn't quite understand, and we'll go fix those as well.
Yeah. They always say that you build your second house better than your first house, right? So, but with that in mind, kind of what were the lessons that you learned in the process as you look back now at this as it's come to fruition? Any lessons that you learned about your company, about the process that you've taken on?
Yeah, I think for lessons learned, we definitely once we start moving, we were moving quickly, right? We were breaking ground and moving dirt and starting to pour up walls when we didn't necessarily have all of our equipment selected. And I think, right, there's potentially some challenges with that in terms of as you change things, right, you got to go through some change management. But I don't think if we wouldn't have done it that way, this project would probably still be a couple of years away from being complete. So I think that going very fast, having the main concepts early and driving, and I think that goes back to your other question of, the teamwork and having everybody involved, that made a lot of that change management a lot easier to manage and handle. And I think with all of that, staying focused on what our true goals were, right? You can imagine we're doing this in the middle of COVID, supply chain challenges, right? And, we definitely had to be nimble and make sure that we were focused on the important things or critical path items and managing those things very closely with our supplier partners, along with, how we're going to implement this into the factories as well. I think, go ahead, Jessi.
Oh, I was just going to highlight, I think one of the neatest things that I learned, and I knew it, but this was really an opportunity to see it in action, is everybody in the company was behind this project. And so what we were able to accomplish was because of that focus and that dedication. And it was really just amazing to see the whole company really pull together behind this. Like anytime we needed something, I could ask one of my peers, like, I need a person or I need this. And they'd be like, here you go. How can I help you? And so that really highlighted to me the importance of that focus and that teamwork, as you were mentioning before.
Yeah. And so you must have really then at the outset really kind of communicated to the whole company as an employee on this is what we're doing, this is why we're doing it, let's go, right? So
at SEL we have something that's called Friday lunch. So every Friday we have a catered 30-minute business meeting where the employee owners get to learn about what's going on in the company. So it could be a finance update, it could be something from manufacturing, it could be whatever, teaching about a new product. And so yes, John and his team have had a lot of opportunities over the last 2 years to present at Friday lunch. I think they were up there about once a month talking about the process, what we're doing, and really trying to educate the whole company about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and answering questions as we go.
Yeah, no, that's excellent. So, I know what you've done is an initiative that I know the PCBA is pushing. I've been asking for years, where's it going to be here? When is more PCB fabs going to be created in the United States? So people are going to see this and wonder, hey, how could we do the same? What advice would you give to other companies who are considering going down the same path that you guys just did?
Well, don't do it during COVID. No, I think, one of the most important things that we identified early is finding the right suppliers, right supplier partners, right? Especially for us, we're learning, right? And making sure that you find those right supplier partners that are bought in, to your project and we're willing to work with you and teach you. And, there was, several instances during this process where we were asking a lot of questions and we actually helped our suppliers, learn some new things along the way as well, because you typically what you see in the industry today is, they're selling equipment to existing customers and they just sell a piece of equipment where, we were building a whole ecosystem throughout this factory, and we're doing it a little bit different than some of the others out there today, right? We focused on automation and traceability, and with that came some challenges, and kind of working through all that. I think, not only did we get, some good learnings, but so did our supplier partners. On the project itself is just managing the risks and understanding critical path items. And that's where, when I say focus on our goals is, right, we don't necessarily need certain pieces of equipment to actually build a circuit board day one. And how do we make sure that we not only are we focused on those right things that our internal suppliers or partners are, and as well as our external, right? If we have to make decisions of getting, piece of equipment A versus B, which one do we really need, especially if there's either resource constraints at their facilities or component constraints, to make sure that they're focused on the right things as well.
I would throw in there, so John mentioned supplier partners, the people. So this was an opportunity, like everybody that came onto this project was new to the project, at least. Not everybody was new to SEL, but everybody was hired specifically for this. So I think that was probably the very first thing that we really had to do, is ensure that we're hiring the right folks. So we haven't made printed circuit boards before. I'm sure, as everybody knows, right, there's not a lot of people out in the industry who have. So, what our philosophy was, we were really looking for folks who are very strong in their fundamentals and excited and eager to be a part of a manufacturing facility. And so we focused on hiring those folks. And fortunately, we had some folks internally that actually have chemical engineering backgrounds, and it was really great because they have also they have spent their careers at SEL in manufacturing, assembling the boards that now they get to manufacture. So they have that very close tie and understanding of the challenges when things don't go right. So I think finding the right people has been probably the biggest thing, and the biggest advice I would give to others is focus on that first.
Yeah. That's excellent. Yeah, because I mean, it's the people skill. And that's, I think, one of the concerns people have, we've talked, was environmental, but as you found out, that can be done very cleanly. So to your point though, Jessi, a lot of people are worried in the industry, if we were to do this, do we have the wherewithal to do it? Do we still have the knowledge? And because it's been gone for so long out of the country, and it may not be as prevalent as it was in years past, but it certainly still exists. So I like that approach. I think this is a great story, guys. I think, and thank you for allowing me to to speak to you, to kind of share this with our audience. I know they will appreciate it. I think it serves a need within the industry, and it sets a good example for hopefully some other companies to do the same, because, I think you spent $100 million is what it says. And I was telling John before, you look at the CHIPS Act and we're talking about $50 billion about something. This is almost a rounding error. And I love the PCBA's logo or quote, which is "the boards don't float," right? That this is a critical component in any PCBA. And so I love what you've done, and congratulations to you and the whole SEL team.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your time today. Maybe we can get a catch up in the future, and hopefully have greater stories to tell. So thank you both very, very much.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Eric.